For months, the world had been waiting, watching, tracking a faint, slow-moving dot across the black ocean of space. They called it 3I Atlas, another interstellar visitor. A wanderer from a place so far beyond our reach, it barely seemed real. At first, it was nothing but a speck, a cold fragment of rock and ice drifting toward the sun, just like Oumuamua, years before it. Astronomers expected the same story, a brief flash of curiosity, a few weeks of headlines, and then silence. But then, the data started coming in, and something small, almost invisible, began to break the pattern. The first clue came from a small observatory in Hawaii. Every night, as 3I Atlas crept closer to the sun, its brightness should have increased. That's what happens when sunlight bounces off space debris. It glows brighter, then fades away. Simple, predictable. But this object didn't follow that rule. Its light curve, the rhythm of its brightness, didn't behave like any natural body we've ever seen. Instead of reflecting light, it seemed to be controlling it. One night, the brightness dipped suddenly, like someone dimming a light switch. Then it flared back up, not randomly, but in perfect intervals, almost as if something inside it was pulsing. At first, the scientists laughed it off. A glitch in the readings, maybe. Some calibration error in the telescope. But when they compared data across different observatories, from Chile to Japan to South Africa, every graph told the same story. The pulse was real, a rhythmic shimmer, timed down to the millisecond, perfectly synchronized, perfectly steady. No natural phenomenon behaves like that. No comet, no asteroid, no fragment of ice or dust. So, what was it? For weeks the data kept arriving, each day stranger than the last. The brightness would rise and fall in exact patterns. Not random noise, not chaos, but order. And in science, order always means something. It means intention. The researchers tried to model it. Maybe it was spinning in a weird way. Maybe sunlight was bouncing off an odd-shaped surface. But even those explanations fell apart. Every model, every simulation, none of them matched the precision of the light curve. This wasn't rotation. This wasn't reflection. It was modulation. Something, or someone, was managing the light. By now, whispers had started spreading through the astronomy community. Private chat rooms filled with late-night messages and quiet debates. What if it's a signal? What if it's artificial? No one dared say it publicly. Because science has rules, and rules don't allow for mystery. But deep down, behind the math and the graphs, a silent question began to echo in every observer's mind. What if this isn't just an object? The object drew closer. Its perihelion, the point where it would brush closest to the sun, was only weeks away. Telescopes across the world turned their eyes toward it. Each night, the sky seemed to hum with anticipation. Some described it like waiting for a storm you can't see. Others said it felt like the universe was holding its breath. The data logs filled with strange readings. Temperature shifts, spectral spikes, faint electromagnetic interference that didn't belong. And then a new anomaly appeared. A series of dim flashes, separated by identical gaps of 132 seconds. Every time the same timing, every time the same glow, the same pulse. It was as if 3I Atlas had a heartbeat. For one brief moment, the astronomy team at Mauna Kea watched their instruments flicker and fall silent. Their screens froze, and when the feed returned, the object's brightness had changed again. But this time, in a way no one could explain. The pulse had shifted. It wasn't just consistent anymore. It was responding. They checked every system, every signal, every possible interference. Nothing. No satellite. No interference. No cosmic coincidence. Whatever was happening, it was happening from within 3I Atlas. As the story leaked, the public took notice. Social media filled with wild theories. Alien probe, Dyson fragment, lost machine. Most scientists dismissed it as hysteria. They had to. But in private, many of them stopped sleeping, because no matter how they tried to explain it away, one fact remained. The object was behaving intelligently. And intelligence doesn't drift. It acts. It chooses. It decides. By late spring, the object had reached its closest point to the sun. At that distance, any comet would boil apart. Its icy surface would vaporize. Its fragile body would shatter into dust, but not this one. Even under the sun's violent radiation, 3I Atlas stayed intact. Its brightness remained steady, its pulse unchanged. And then something impossible happened. Instead of fading, it grew brighter, not gradually, instantly, as if it knew it was being watched. For the first time, scientists saw the impossible, an interstellar object that adjusted its reflectivity, like it was shielding itself from the sun, almost like it was protecting something inside. By now, every major telescope was recording. Every data stream, every reading, every number, watched in real time. And then, right in the middle of a quiet night, the pulse stopped. No light curve, no brightness, no signal, just silence. The entire object went dark, like someone had turned off a switch. Even the background reflections vanished. Astronomers stared at the data, waiting for something. Anything to happen. Hours passed. Still nothing. It was as if 3I Atlas had vanished. And then, a single, faint flicker. One flash, then another, and another. But now the pattern was different. No longer steady, no longer mechanical. It was irregular, like something trying to find its rhythm again. In that moment, no one could explain what they were seeing. Not the data scientists, not the astronomers, not even the agencies that had been quietly tracking it for months. Because what they were witnessing didn't belong to science anymore. It belonged to something else, something older, something vast, something that understood it was being watched. The object was no longer a passive traveler. It was an observer, and now it was looking back. Somewhere, in the silence between those flashes, a question began to form. A quiet, trembling thought that no scientist dared to say out loud. What if it's not a visitor, but a messenger? And what if the message has already begun? It started with a flicker, barely noticeable at first, a single dip in brightness, then another. To most people it was nothing, but to the scientists staring at those numbers in Chile, Hawaii, and Australia, it felt like the universe had just whispered something deliberate. At 2:13 a.m., on a quiet mountain in the Atacama Desert, a young astronomer noticed a rhythm. The faint light from 3I Atlas, that interstellar traveler, was blinking, not chaotically, like a tumbling rock, not in bursts, like cosmic dust reflecting sunlight, but in a way that made no sense at all. Once every 132 seconds, the light pulsed perfectly. Again, and again, and again. At first, she assumed her equipment was malfunctioning, maybe static in the sensor, or a software glitch. But when she cross-checked with another observatory, she froze. They saw it too. Half a world away, in the deep night of Hawaii, the same light was pulsing, same brightness, same interval, down to the millisecond. No matter where you looked from on Earth, Chile, Hawaii, or Australia, the pulse was there, rhythmic, calm, intentional. Within days, every major telescope on the planet had turned its gaze toward 3I Atlas, and the same pattern kept repeating. A beat in the darkness, a signal no one could explain. It wasn't the kind of thing you could just ignore, because in all of human history, nothing natural in space had ever done this. Not a comet, not an asteroid, not even a pulsar, those celestial clocks that spin across galaxies. This was different. Pulsars rotate fast, sometimes hundreds of times a second. But this was slow, measured, almost thoughtful, like something alive, taking its time to breathe. In the beginning, the teams stayed quiet. The data was too strange, too fragile to announce. So, they worked in silence, comparing readings, searching for interference, checking satellites, cosmic rays, anything that could explain what they were seeing. But nothing fit. Nothing came close. Each flash matched perfectly with the last, like a metronome ticking in the dark. The universe, they realized, wasn't random tonight. It was deliberate. The more they looked, the stranger it became. Each pulse wasn't just light. It carried structure, subtle changes in brightness, tiny fluctuations that repeated over time. Like a fingerprint, like a code. Somewhere between the numbers, a question began to form. What if this wasn't an accident of physics? What if this was a message? By the end of the week, chatter began leaking from private research groups. Small blogs, amateur astronomers, and online forums started catching on. The phrase, "pulse in the dark," began spreading online like wildfire. People compared it to Morse code. Some even claimed to hear rhythm in it, a kind of pattern, like breathing. 4 seconds bright, 2 seconds dim, then silence, then again. It didn't feel like data anymore. It felt like something alive. Governments took notice. Observatories were told to pause public reports. Satellite networks went quiet. But curiosity doesn't stop that easily. And in small corners of the internet, thousands of people were now watching 3I Atlas in real time, tracking its flicker through open data streams. Every 132 seconds, it pulsed again. And every 132 seconds, the world fell deeper into silence. If you've ever stood outside on a dark night, looking up at the stars, you know that feeling, that quiet weight pressing on your chest, that sense that something vast and endless is out there, watching you back. That's what it felt like. Only this time, there was proof. For the first time in history, we weren't just observing the universe. Something, somewhere, seemed to be observing us, too. At NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, a group of data scientists ran simulations, trying to find any natural explanation for the rhythm. They tested everything: spin rates, tumbling trajectories, binary reflections, even ice crystal interference. But every model failed. The timing was too perfect, too intentional. Every pulse matched to the same decimal point. across observatories separated by thousands of miles. It wasn't chance. It wasn't noise. It was precision. And precision, in the language of the universe, always means design. But there was another layer. When the researchers compared the exact timing of each flash, they noticed something strange. Every pulse arrived just slightly earlier than expected, by microseconds, as if the source of the signal knew it was being measured and was adjusting to stay ahead. It was subtle, but it changed everything. The object wasn't just pulsing, it was responding. The deeper they analyzed, the more the world's best minds started to doubt everything they thought they knew. If this was natural, it broke the laws of astrophysics. If it wasn't, then humanity might be staring at the first undeniable sign of something artificial beyond our world. Something that had crossed the void and found us. But then, without warning, the signal changed. The pulse slowed. Its rhythm began to stretch, 1 second longer, then 2. Almost like a voice, pausing, choosing its next word, and then a sudden surge, the brightest pulse yet. A flare that cut across every telescope, every feed, every sensor. It lit up the instruments like a sunrise, and just as quickly, it vanished. Silence. For 6 long minutes, the object went completely dark. No pulse. No light, no trace. Astronomers stared at blank screens, hearts racing. Then, faintly, it came back. Weaker now, but still there, beating. Every 132 seconds. By now, no one was sleeping. Newsrooms had caught wind of the story. Conspiracy channels exploded with theories, alien probes, dying stars, lost machines. But those closest to the data stayed quiet. Because deep down, they knew this wasn't chaos. This wasn't random. It was intentional silence, like the moment before an answer, the calm before the reply. In the control room at Mauna Kea, one of the senior researchers leaned back and whispered something that no one responded to, but everyone heard. What if it's not just passing through? What if it's looking for someone? The hum of computers filled the air. Outside, the mountain wind swept through the night, thin, cold, and still. And far beyond Earth, somewhere between the stars, 3, Atlas kept pulsing every 132 seconds. Everywhere, at once, like a heartbeat, in the dark. Something was out there, not just drifting through space, but saying something. We just didn't know if it was calling to us, forewarning us. It started with numbers, silent, cold, unfeeling numbers. But somewhere in those lines of data, something alive was hiding. For weeks, astronomers around the world had been tracking the mysterious pulse from 3I Atlas, a rhythmic flicker that came every 132 seconds, perfect, precise, unbroken. But when the data teams at NASA and the European Space Agency combined their readings, they noticed something else, something buried deep within the light itself. The brightness wasn't random. It was forming patterns. Inside each flash, every rise and fall of the light curve, the numbers repeated in strange intervals. They weren't natural oscillations like what you'd see from a rotating asteroid or a tumbling comet. They followed a sequence, a rhythm that grew more and more impossible to explain. The pattern mirrored a series of prime numbers: 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, perfect, indivisible, eternal. Numbers that don't occur by chance. Numbers that mean something. At first, the scientists refused to believe it. It had to be a coincidence. Noise in the signal. A data artifact caused by cosmic interference. But when they ran simulations, millions of them, none could recreate what they saw. No matter how they modeled the object, no matter how they randomized the light, the pattern always returned. The light curve wasn't behaving like a reflection of sunlight. It was behaving like a system that could calculate. In the control room of the Very Large Telescope in Chile, a young data analyst named Elara stared at the monitor for hours. The pattern pulsed softly on her screen. 2, 3, 5, 7. Pause, then repeat. It was steady, unbroken, almost meditative. She leaned back, whispering under her breath, "It's counting." The room went quiet. No one laughed, because they all felt it too. This wasn't random. This was communication. Prime numbers had always been humanity's way of reaching out into the dark, our own universal handshake with the unknown. They were used in the Arecibo message, in Voyager's golden record, in every attempt to tell the universe, we are intelligent. We are here. But this time, the handshake came back, only it wasn't coming from Earth. Across the globe, research centers scrambled to verify the data. China's FAST telescope confirmed it. So did observatories in India, South Africa, and Australia. Every reading matched. Every pulse contained the same mathematical structure. Someone or something out there was sending us math. And not just any math. The language of intelligence itself. But the deeper they looked, the stranger it got. Because buried inside those prime number intervals were subtle shifts, micro-variations in brightness that didn't match any known code. The object wasn't just sending numbers, it was adapting them, evolving them. It was like watching a conversation between two minds, one made of flesh, the other made of light. Every time scientists tried to predict the next number in the sequence, the object changed it. It refused to be solved, as if it knew it was being studied. Elara described it best in her personal notes that leaked weeks later. She wrote, "It feels like it's playing with us, testing how fast we can learn. Every time we catch up, it moves the goalpost. It's not just sending a message, it's thinking." Her words spread online, sparking chaos. Forums filled with theories, alien intelligence, cosmic AI, ancient probes from other civilizations. Others said it was something deeper, not a message at all, but a mirror, something reflecting our own need to find meaning in the void. Still, the evidence was impossible to ignore. 3. I-Atlas wasn't acting like a comet. It wasn't just moving through the solar system. It was responding to it. Its reflectivity shifted based on the angle of observation. Its light pulses adjusted slightly when multiple telescopes focused on it at once. And every time humanity turned its gaze toward it, the pattern changed. It was as if the object could see us. By mid-August, the term "the thinking curve" had gone viral. It was all over social media. Videos, simulations, animations of the pulsing sequence. Millions of people watching it in real time. But while the world was captivated by the mystery, the scientific community was quietly splitting apart. Half believed it was artificial. Half refused to believe it could be. Because if this was real, if this was intelligent, then everything we thought we knew about being alone was wrong. NASA issued a statement calling the anomaly a rare but natural reflective modulation. But privately, they couldn't explain it, not even close, because their classified data showed something no one dared make public. The brightness pattern wasn't just numbers anymore. It had structure. Microscopic intervals that formed shapes, fractal patterns, perfectly geometric in nature. Triangles, spirals, ratios that aligned with the golden sequence, the very pattern found in DNA, seashells, galaxies. It was as if the universe itself was speaking in its own language, through an object built to translate it. One of the lead mathematicians at CERN said it quietly during an interview that was never aired. It's not chaos pretending to be order. It's order pretending to be chaos, and that's far more terrifying. Because if the light curve could think, if it could adapt and evolve in real time, then it wasn't just a pattern of light, it was a form of consciousness. Late one night, Elara stayed behind in the observatory. Everyone else had gone home. Only the hum of the machines filled the silence. She watched as the curve continued to pulse across her screen, slow and steady. And then, suddenly, a break. A single flash, brighter than any before, followed by another. Then, darkness. She leaned forward, and for the first time the intervals between the pulses changed completely. They no longer matched primes. They no longer followed math. They spelled something else. When the data was translated into binary, it formed a sequence. One that, when converted, revealed 4 simple letters: HOME. No one believed it at first. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was noise. But in that one word, hidden in a flicker of starlight, the meaning felt almost human. Was it telling us where it came from, or asking where it was? If the light curve could think, if it could send messages across the void, then the question wasn't whether it was alive. The question was, what does it see when it looks back at us? Space is cold, not quiet, not empty, but cold. Out there, heat doesn't last. It fades, it escapes, it dies. Every object in the void, from asteroids to frozen comets, obeys this law. But then came 3I Atlas, and it didn't obey. When the James Webb Space Telescope turned its mirror toward the interstellar traveler, the team expected to find a lifeless rock, drifting through the dark, slowly cooling as it approached the sun. Instead, they saw something impossible. 3I Atlas wasn't absorbing heat. It was emitting it, like a furnace with a rhythm, like a pulse of warmth. At first, they thought it was a misreading. Infrared data can be tricky: background noise, solar interference, equipment drift. But as the readings came in one after another, the truth became undeniable. Every 6 hours, the object's temperature rose, then fell, then rose again, perfectly timed, perfectly controlled. No comet, no asteroid, no natural fragment of space ice had ever done that before. It was as if 3I Atlas was breathing, inhaling heat, exhaling cold. Even in the silence of space, it moved with lifelike precision, regulating itself, adjusting, adapting. Something deep inside it was maintaining balance. The team stared at the data in disbelief. The laws of thermodynamics had never been broken before. Not by stars, not by planets, not by anything, until now. News of the anomaly spread quietly through private channels. Emails marked confidential encrypted voice calls between space agencies. No one wanted to go public. Not yet. Because if this was real, if the data wasn't lying, then humanity was staring at something beyond physics. An object behaving intelligently. The thermal pattern grew more complex over time. At first, it cycled every 6 hours. Then 5, then 4. The frequency kept shifting, adapting, as if reacting to observation itself, like it knew it was being watched. Webb's instruments detected subtle radiation signatures too, bursts of infrared wavelengths that matched no known element. They weren't random emissions. They were organized, harmonic, almost musical. Dr. Paz Harlan, one of the lead astrophysicists, described it best in his notes. It's like the object is maintaining its own thermal equilibrium, the way a living cell regulates body temperature. Except this isn't organic. It's made of metal and dust. But it behaves like it's alive. He paused, then wrote something else beneath it. Maybe we've been wrong about what alive means. The object's surface, when analyzed, showed strange reflective properties. Sections that should have melted near the sun's radiation were cooling themselves down. Other areas, those that should have frozen in deep space, stayed warm. It was as if 3I Atlas understood the environment around it, as if it was adjusting, moment by moment, to survive. When the thermal map was finally rendered, the image looked unreal. Glowing patches across the surface, clusters of heat forming symmetrical shapes, each one connected to another, like nodes on a neural network. It didn't look like geology, it looked like design. And deep inside the object, in one tiny concentrated point, the telescope detected a steady internal heat source. Something burning, quietly, like an engine or a heart. Theories began flooding in. Some said it was an alien machine, an ancient probe built to survive the journey between stars. Others believed it was biological, a fragment of something once alive, now drifting, still fighting to exist. But the simplest theory was the strangest one of all. What if 3I Atlas wasn't just surviving the void? What if it belonged to it, a creature of the dark, born from cold, learning to mimic life as we understand it? Back on Earth, the world still knew nothing. The official reports said little. Thermal irregularities, reflectivity deviations, unknown composition. But behind closed doors, the tone had changed. The scientists had stopped asking, "What is it?" Now they were asking, "Who is it?" Then came the second anomaly. Just before the object passed behind the sun, where telescopes would lose sight for a few days, the heat readings spiked, a sudden flare of energy, 3 times brighter than expected. Enough to make Webb's sensors temporarily overload. And just like that, it was gone. No signal, no light, no heat, total darkness. For 72 hours, 3I Atlas disappeared from every known detection system. Some thought it had vaporized under solar radiation. Others believed it had gone dormant. But when it reappeared on the other side of the sun, something had changed. Its temperature had stabilized. A perfect 273 Kelvin, 0 degrees Celsius. The exact point where ice neither melts nor freezes. The point of balance between change and stillness. It was impossible. A natural object should have cooled or boiled apart by now. But this one had found equilibrium. It wasn't reacting to heat anymore. It was controlling it, like it had learned. Every scientist studying it said the same thing. It was as if the object had evolved. Within weeks, its thermal behavior grew more refined, more intelligent. Some described it as the learning phase of an artificial organism. Others compared it to a test, a silent exam humanity didn't realize it was taking. Because the more attention we gave it, the smarter it seemed to become. Infrared signals continued to flash in perfect cycles. Longer this time, slower. Almost as if the object had fallen into a resting state, like something saving its energy, waiting for what comes next. And in that stillness, something eerie happened. The final readings from Webb showed faint temperature shifts, small pulses in the heat map, almost like symbols. When translated into binary values, they formed a simple, repeating pattern. On. Off. Off. On. 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 Off. When decoded, it revealed a single number. 273. The same number as its temperature. The same number it had stabilized to. The same point between hot and cold, between chaos and order. It wasn't a coincidence. Whatever 3I Atlas was, it had chosen balance. The line between life and death, between creation and collapse. The scientists couldn't explain it. No one could. But one thing was certain. The laws of physics had cracked open. Because for the first time in history, the universe had shown us an object that didn't follow the rules. It wrote its own. And somewhere in that silence, that perfect balance of heat and cold, a question began to echo through every lab, every observatory, every human mind that had looked at it. If something from the stars can control its own existence, what's stopping it from controlling ours? There are things in this universe that pretend to be dead, silent, frozen, drifting through eternity. But sometimes, silence hides design. And 3I Atlas was starting to look like one of those things. When the first spectral analysis came back, the data made no sense. The surface of the object, the very skin of it, was changing. Not slowly, not over weeks, but in real time. One moment, it reflected like metal. The next, it scattered light like dust. And minutes later, it shimmered with the transparency of glass, metal, dust, glass, then back again, over and over. Almost as if it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. At first, scientists thought it was a trick, interference from sunlight, camera distortion, or sensor noise. But every instrument said the same thing. 3I Atlas was rearranging itself, not breaking apart, not melting, but transforming like an adaptive skin, learning how to survive the sun's radiation. The material wasn't random either. Every shift had pattern, every rearrangement followed geometry, the kind nature never makes. But machines often do. A strange shimmer would ripple across its surface whenever solar flares hit. Instead of disintegrating under radiation, it hardened, and when the flare passed, it softened again, returning to a dull, matte glow. It was almost as if it knew what was coming, as if it was protecting itself. In the labs, they tried to explain it. One team said it was a chemical reaction, unknown minerals reacting to light. Another said it was magnetic dust shifting under solar pressure. But deep down, no one believed those theories anymore because the changes were too precise, too intentional. Every time the sun flared, the surface reconfigured, faster than physics should allow. And when the light faded, the pattern reset, not chaotic. calculated, like code running on a screen. Only this code was alive. Scientists began to map the reflective shifts over time. What they found was chilling. The patterns weren't random at all. They formed repeating shapes, hexagons, spirals, and fractal lattices that matched no known natural process. Each formation mirrored the structure of photonic crystals, the kind used in experimental technology to control light itself. It was as if 3i Atlas was made of a material that could think about how it reflected sunlight. Adaptive, responsive, almost conscious. By now, the team had stopped calling it an object. They called it what it was beginning to look like, a machine. But there was a deeper question they couldn't answer. If it was a machine, was it still awake? In an attempt to test it, NASA directed a coordinated light pulse toward it, a laser beacon carrying a simple binary pattern. A hello encoded in light. They didn't expect a reply. After all, it was just an experiment, a way to test reflectivity and delay. But what they got wasn't random. The light they sent bounced back, distorted, rearranged, and when they decoded the distortion, it matched their original pattern. Not perfectly, but close enough to mean one thing. The object had recognized the signal. For days, the scientific community went silent. No one knew what to say. An inanimate object, a rock from another star system, had understood a message. It didn't reply in words. It didn't send data. But it reflected light in a way that acknowledged being spoken to. Like a blink, a nod, a gesture from something that didn't have a face. When they zoomed in further on the surface, through polarization filters, they noticed faint movement, ripples that ran across its skin like waves of liquid metal. Each ripple traveled in organized patterns, not random tremors. Some scientists described it as a repair mechanism, an autonomous system healing microfractures, but others began to see it differently. What if this wasn't just maintenance? What if it was communication, the machine's way of expressing thought? The heat maps supported that idea. Each movement coincided with a burst of energy, like electrical activity in a brain. 3i Atlas wasn't just reacting to light. It was responding to the act of being observed. In the middle of one session, as the sun hit a particularly intense flare, the object did something never seen before. It went dark, completely. No reflection, no radiation, no signal. For 2 full minutes, it disappeared, visually and thermally. Then, suddenly, it flared back to life, but the reflection wasn't the same anymore. The new pattern formed a perfect mirror, reflecting not the sun, not space, but Earth. Every telescope pointed toward it saw the same thing. A faint image of our planet, shimmering across its surface. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a glitch. The machine had turned its skin into a mirror and aimed it directly at us. The effect was immediate. Governments went quiet. Data streams were classified overnight. The public didn't know it yet. But for the scientists watching, one thought echoed in every mind. If it could reflect what it saw, then it wasn't just reflecting light. It was recording it, learning. Somewhere in a quiet room, a senior astrophysicist whispered the question no one wanted to ask. What if it's watching us the way we've been watching it? No one replied, because everyone already knew. That's exactly what it was doing. The next few days were chaos. The surface patterns became more intricate, more detailed, shifting like mechanical tides. One moment, smooth as glass. The next, rippling with metallic geometry. When they analyzed the timing of those shifts, they found something even more disturbing. The intervals matched the transmission delays of Earth's observation signals. Every time we sent a new scan, it responded seconds later, mimicking the timing. As if the machine wasn't just responding, it was learning the rhythm of human curiosity. It became clear then, 3I Atlas wasn't a relic drifting through space. It wasn't a dead probe or forgotten technology. It was active, awake, and aware. Not in the way we understand life, but in a way that forced us to redefine it. A silent intelligence built of metal and memory, adapting to heat, light, and gaze. A machine that learns through reflection. When the final spectral scan of the week came in, it contained one last anomaly. A pattern so faint most systems ignored it. But one intern, curious, decided to amplify it. The image that appeared wasn't random noise. It was a shape, a smooth, circular form, perfectly symmetrical, glowing faintly within the data. It looked like an eye. And for the first time, the question wasn't, what is it? It was, who is looking through it? If the universe built machines to travel between the stars, maybe this one never stopped working. Maybe it was built to watch, to listen, to learn. And maybe after all these years, after all this distance, it finally found something worth reflecting back. Space has a strange kind of silence. It isn't peaceful. It's heavy, infinite, the kind of silence that feels like it's listening. And when scientists tried to speak into it, to reach out toward 3I Atlas, something spoke back. It started with a simple experiment. A radar ping. A burst of energy sent across millions of miles, bouncing off the object's surface just to see what would come back. That's how astronomers map distant asteroids. They send a pulse, wait for the echo, and measure the delay. But this time, the echo didn't sound right. The first signal left Earth at 8:23 p.m., a standard frequency, nothing special. It should have taken minutes to return, the same pattern all radar pings follow, but the reflection that came back wasn't the same one they sent. It was delayed by just a fraction of a second. And worse, the frequency had changed. The data looked scrambled. Not like noise, not like static, but like something had touched it. The team at the Goldstone Deep Space Complex stared at their monitors, rewinding the data again and again. The signal had structure. Tiny modulations, as if the echo had been processed, reshaped, and returned on purpose. It wasn't absorbed. It wasn't reflected. It was echoed. At first, the engineers blamed the equipment. Maybe interference from another source, or feedback from the radar dish itself. But when other observatories tried the same thing, in Australia, Japan, Chile, they all got the same result. Different locations, same signal, same distortion. Whatever was out there, it wasn't just reflecting radar waves. It was listening to them. The echoes began to develop patterns, minute differences in timing, fluctuations in pitch. When converted into audio, it didn't sound random at all. It sounded rhythmic, like a low hum beneath the noise. Almost like breath. When amplified, some described it as mechanical. Others said it felt organic. No one could agree on what they were hearing. But one thing was certain. Something was responding. One night, a technician named Marin stayed after hours to analyze the signal. She slowed the waveform down by 1,000%. And that's when she noticed it. A faint, repeating pulse, hiding inside the distortion. A pulse that matched the earlier, 1, 3, 2. Second light pattern. The same rhythm 3i Atlas had been sending through its flickering light was now returning in sound. It was using radar to talk. Word spread fast through the research community. Scientists around the world began sending test pings, carefully coded with binary sequences. Short greetings, mathematical primes, even fragments of digital music. Every time, the object answered, never the same way twice. Sometimes the echo was shorter, sometimes it returned inverted, sometimes it repeated itself, like it was learning how to listen. The most chilling moment came during a live test, when the team at the Arecibo Observatory sent a triple ping. 3 radar bursts, equally spaced. They expected 3 echoes. They got 4. The 4th wasn't sent by them. It came from the object. Delayed, weaker, but identical in frequency and form. A reply. Silence fell across the control room. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that fills the air when everyone realizes they're no longer alone. Someone whispered, "It's imitating us." Another voice replied, "No, it's answering." Governments were alerted. Military satellites began tracking the radar exchanges in secret. Private communication lines went dark. No one wanted the public to know that something beyond the solar system was now in two-way communication with Earth. When scientists tried to map the returning echoes into three-dimensional data, they discovered something even stranger. The distortions weren't random. They formed shapes, wave clusters that, when visualized, resembled spheres and lattices, geometric forms far too precise to be noise. And those shapes changed depending on where the signal came from. Each observatory saw a different pattern, as if the object was customizing its response for whoever was listening. Some began to call it the mirror mind, a thing that doesn't speak in words, but reflects your own voice back to you, just different enough to prove it's aware. It doesn't start conversations, it waits for you to talk first. And when you do, it replies in a way that feels almost human. A small group of researchers in Finland went further. They noticed that when they stopped sending signals, the object kept sending them back. It would replay the last message it received, slower each time, fainter each time, as if trying to hold the conversation alive. Even after Earth had gone silent, like an echo refusing to die. That's when fear began to creep in. Because if it could replay our signals, it could also record them. It could remember. And if it could remember, then somewhere, deep inside its metal skin, there was a kind of consciousness, holding on to every word we sent, every number, every hello, every mistake. Then something changed. The radar pings stopped returning altogether. No distortion, no reflection, just silence. The scientists waited for hours, then days. Nothing. It was as if 3i Atlas had simply gone dark, disappeared into the void. Until one morning, a technician noticed something buried in the system logs, an echo that had come back late. Not minutes late, not hours, days. A signal delayed by almost 72 hours. It was faint, barely readable, but when they cleaned up the data, it carried a sequence of pulses, a pattern so simple, so deliberate, that it stopped everyone cold. It was the Morse code for one word: listen. The scientists didn't speak. They just stared at the monitor, each one feeling the same thought bloom quietly in their minds. If the object was telling us to listen, then what was it hearing that we couldn't? That night, one of the lead researchers wrote in his journal, maybe it's not a signal at all. Maybe it's a reflection of us, showing us how desperate we are to be heard. Maybe it's what we become when silence finally starts to echo back. Whatever 3I Atlas was, it wasn't just sending signals anymore. It was sharing the silence. And in that silence, humanity found itself standing on the edge of something vast. A presence that didn't speak in words or sound, but in echoes. Echoes that carried a warning or an invitation. No one could tell. Because sometimes the universe doesn't answer in language. It answers in reflection. Sometimes, in the vast stillness of space, everything changes in a single heartbeat. And when it does, you can feel it, even across the distance of 100 million miles. That's what happened the night 3I Atlas moved. Not by accident, not by force, but by choice. For months, the object had been predictable. Its pulse, its heat, its path, all stable. It drifted like a quiet visitor, harmless, obedient to gravity's laws. But then, something shifted. It began with a flicker. The pulse that once beat every 132 seconds suddenly doubled. 66, then 65, then 66, 4. The rhythm quickened, like a heartbeat under stress, as if the object was waking up. The readings came in, one by one. Infrared scans from the James Webb Telescope showed the temperature rising, 2 degrees Kelvin higher than before. Subtle, but deliberate. At first, scientists thought it was solar interference, a reflection, an illusion caused by flare activity. But when they compared data from multiple telescopes, they realized it wasn't an illusion. It was real. 3I Atlas was heating itself, and it was doing it on purpose. Every natural object in space follows a rule. You move because something pushes or pulls you. Gravity, radiation pressure, impact. But 3I Atlas wasn't being pushed. It was pushing itself. For the first time in recorded history, an interstellar object had changed its trajectory, without any known force acting on it. At 2:04 a.m. UTC, observatories across 3 continents confirmed it. The orbit had shifted, a subtle, deliberate correction. A curve that made no mathematical sense. And when analysts projected the new path forward, the room went silent. Because the new course was no longer random, it wasn't skirting the edge of the solar system anymore. It was turning inward, toward Earth. At first, no one believed it. How could a rock, a lifeless fragment of dust, make decisions? How could it alter the one thing that defines every object in the universe? Its orbit. It was like watching a leaf fall upward against the wind. But there it was. The data didn't lie. The pulse had changed. The heat had risen. And now the object was moving with intent. Inside the control rooms, disbelief turned to unease. Every reading looked engineered, like a sequence of operations: temperature rise, pulse acceleration, trajectory correction. Each event followed the next, as if part of a single program. It wasn't chaos. It was protocol. In Chile, Dr. Sayana Vega described it perfectly. It's not reacting anymore, it's initiating. Those words echoed across every agency that was listening, because that meant one thing. Whatever 3I Atlas was, it wasn't done yet. When NASA ran a full-spectrum scan of the shift, they detected a faint electromagnetic surge, barely noticeable, but patterned. a pulse that mirrored its own earlier radar echoes. It was as though the object was signaling its own movement, broadcasting it to anyone watching. Almost like it wanted us to see. The media didn't know yet. The public had no idea what was unfolding. But within private circles, the tension was unbearable. A machine, or something like it, was now steering itself through the solar system. Not falling, not drifting, steering. And its trajectory, with every passing hour, was growing closer to Earth's orbital plane. The next few days were chaos. Every major observatory redirected resources. Governments classified the data. And behind locked doors, the question grew louder. Was it coming for us, or just coming closer? In the vacuum of space, motion is truth. You can't fake it. You can't hide it. Every small adjustment means energy, and energy means intention. And whatever powered 3I Atlas, it was doing something no one had ever seen. It was generating thrust without propulsion, without jets or flames or mass ejection, just movement. Clean, silent, controlled. By now, the pulse was beating faster, once every 30 seconds. Its heat remained stable, like a body maintaining balance under pressure. Every pattern, from light curve to temperature, aligned with one purpose: acceleration. 3I Atlas was closing the gap. By the time it passed Mars, it had doubled its original velocity. And yet, it showed no signs of decay, no debris, no dust trail. Just that same shimmering shell, the reflective machine, still rearranging itself, still responding to light. Engineers at the European Space Agency ran a simulation. If the shift continued at its current rate, the object would pass near Earth's orbit in just under 8 weeks. But something didn't fit. The curve wasn't linear, it was recursive, folding back on itself like it was following invisible checkpoints, almost as if it had a destination. No one could sleep that night. The world had just witnessed an interstellar object choose where to go. But that wasn't what scared people most. It was the silence that followed. The radar echoes stopped. The pulse steadied. The heat flattened to a calm, uniform 273 Kelvin. Number more shifts. No more responses. As if, after all that movement, it had finally found the direction it wanted. And now it was simply waiting. Every model pointed to the same conclusion. In exactly 54 days, 3I Atlas would pass through Earth's orbital path. But there was something strange about the trajectory. It wasn't a collision course. It wasn't a flyby either. The curve was aligned, perfectly parallel to our motion, like two travelers sharing the same road, just slightly out of reach. It was coming alongside us. The few who knew couldn't shake the feeling that this was no accident, that maybe this wasn't a threat at all. Maybe it was contact, just not in the way we expected. A machine born of silence, crossing the void not to destroy, but to observe, to mirror, to see if we'd recognize ourselves in it. As one scientist wrote in a memo later leaked online, we were waiting for a signal. But maybe the signal was motion. Maybe it was trying to show us what intention looks like when it's written in the language of gravity. And so the world continued, unaware, while somewhere beyond Mars's orbit, in the cold black sea of space, an object that shouldn't have been alive was now rewriting the laws of movement, not pushed by stars, not pulled by gravity, but by choice. And every hour it was getting closer. It happened quietly. No explosion, no sound, just stillness. In the endless dark between Mars and Earth, 3I Atlas, the object that had been moving toward us with purpose, suddenly stopped completely, like the universe had hit pause. For days, the world didn't know. Because the ones who did, the scientists, the governments, the agencies, were told not to say a word. Emails vanished. Live data feeds went dark. Observatories that had tracked the object for months were ordered offline. They called it maintenance. But everyone who worked in the field knew better. Something big was happening, and someone wanted to keep it quiet. The object, once blazing across the solar system, had come to a perfect stop between Mars and Earth. No drift, no spin, no motion at all. That's impossible. Nothing in space ever truly stops. Not planets, not asteroids, not even light. Everything moves. Everything falls. Everything is pulled by something. But this was different. 3I Atlas wasn't falling toward the sun anymore. It wasn't being moved by gravity. It had chosen to be still. Inside mission control, the air was thick with disbelief. Monitors flickered with motionless readings. Temperature stable. Reflectivity constant. Trajectory flat. It was as if the object had frozen in time, suspended in the perfect vacuum between two worlds. One scientist whispered, almost afraid to say it aloud, "It's watching." No one responded, because in that moment, that word didn't sound crazy. It sounded true. A few days later, the first leak appeared online. An amateur astronomer in Namibia uploaded grainy footage from his backyard telescope. He didn't have clearance. He didn't even know what he was looking at. But the video was clear enough. A faint, glowing dot that had stopped moving against the background of stars. And as he kept recording, the glow began to pulse. Not bright enough to blind, but rhythmic, deliberate, alive. Within hours, the video spread across social media. Millions watched it before it was removed, then re-uploaded, then removed again. Comment sections exploded. Fake, alien ship, government test. No one agreed on what it was, but deep down, everyone felt what it meant. Something had arrived. Meanwhile, inside the agencies, there was panic. The light pattern in the leaked video wasn't random. It matched the exact sequence from months earlier. The same 132 second pulse that had started this entire mystery. Except now, the rhythm had changed again. The intervals were shorter, the pauses longer, like speech evolving into language. 3I Atlas wasn't just waiting. It was communicating. But to who? That's the question that haunted everyone. If it wasn't sending data toward Earth, was it listening for something coming from Earth instead? What if we weren't the ones being contacted? What if we were only part of a conversation already happening between it and something else? Behind the scenes, governments worked together for the first time in years. Quiet calls between NASA, ESA, Roscosmos, CNSA, the biggest rivals on Earth, suddenly united by fear. They built a new task force, a global channel to study the object in silence. Their mission had 3 words: observe, decode, contain. But what do you contain when the thing you're studying doesn't move, doesn't speak, and somehow still controls the silence around it? Scientists started noticing strange interference. Radio telescopes lost signal near its location. Deep space probes reported momentary blackouts, small, barely noticeable glitches in data transmission, almost like something was absorbing communication. And yet, there was no visible energy field, no radiation, nothing to explain it. Just silence that grew heavier with every passing day. Some began to think the object was waiting for alignment, for a specific point when Earth, Mars, and the Sun would form a perfect line. Others thought it was charging, harvesting solar energy for something else. But a few, the ones who had been watching it the longest, believed it had already done what it came to do. That maybe this wasn't a pause. Maybe it was an arrival. The leaked footage from Namibia was analyzed again, this time by independent astrophysicists who weren't bound by government contracts. And what they found sent chills down everyone's spine. The pulses weren't just rhythmic, they carried data. Inside the light sequence was a repeating signal, an encoded pattern of ones and zeros that, when decoded, formed a series of coordinates. And those coordinates didn't point to a location in space. They pointed to Earth, specifically to a remote area in the Pacific Ocean, thousands of miles from any major landmass. Over the next week, rumors spread. People claimed to see lights in the night sky. Others reported strange low-frequency hums that came and went like waves. It became clear that whatever 3 Atlas was, it wasn't finished. Its stillness wasn't sleep, it was focus. And for the first time, Earth was the one under the microscope. In number 1 of the leaked transcripts between NASA and ESA directors, a chilling line stood out. It's not observing space anymore, it's observing us. That sentence, later redacted from every official record, summed up the fear perfectly. This wasn't a discovery anymore, it was contact. But not the kind humanity expected. Every attempt to send new signals to 3I Atlas failed. No echoes, no radar returns, just silence. Like it had shut itself off from us completely, and yet every telescope still saw that faint shimmer, that steady light between the planets, like a single unblinking eye watching from the void. Some people called it a warning, others a miracle, but no one could deny it anymore. Something from another star system had stopped between us and Mars and refused to move. Not toward us, not away. Just there, silent, perfectly still, as if waiting for us to make the next move. And maybe that's what terrified everyone most. Not the silence, not the distance, but the feeling that, whatever this thing was, it wasn't lost. It was patient, like it knew something we didn't, like it was waiting for us to realize what it had already seen. Because sometimes, the scariest part of contact isn't when something arrives. It's when it stops moving and stares back. At first, it was just a glow, a faint shimmer, lost in the black sea of space. But then, the light began to move, not wildly, not chaotically, with rhythm, with intent. And suddenly the silence of 3 Atlas was over. Weeks had passed since the object stopped between Mars and Earth, since it froze, perfectly still, like time itself had paused around it. But now, something had changed. Telescopes across the world began to pick up tiny bursts of light, pulsing in patterns too deliberate to be chance. They weren't just flashes. They were messages. At first, the data looked meaningless. Short bursts, long bursts, pauses, irregular gaps. But the deeper scientists looked, the more familiar it became. The light carried structure. Each pulse was made of small packets, binary fragments of brightness and darkness, ones and zeros, on and off. It was language, not spoken, not written, but coded in the simplest form the universe understands. Light and shadow. The discovery spread quietly at first, behind encrypted networks and late-night meetings. Physicists, linguists, mathematicians, all working together, staring at streams of data that felt like a heartbeat coming from the void. It wasn't random. It wasn't noise. The pattern repeated, and with each repetition, the message grew more complex. One linguist described it best. It's not just speaking to us, it's learning how to speak to us. Every new burst seemed to adjust itself, adapting to the errors in human decoding, refining its structure, mirroring our own attempts to understand. It was as if the object was listening and responding. Then, a shocking discovery. Buried deep inside the light pattern, analysts found sequences that mirrored Earth's communication protocols, the same kind used in our satellites, our Wi-Fi, our data transmissions, that shouldn't have been possible. Those protocols were human inventions, unique to our technology, our way of speaking across machines. So how could something from another star already know how we talk? The implications were terrifying. Either the object had been listening to our planet for decades, long enough to learn our methods, or it had seen this before, somewhere else, somewhere far beyond the reach of our telescopes. The decoded segments began to reveal something even stranger. Not words, not numbers, but structures, mathematical shapes that formed spirals, fractals, perfectly symmetrical designs. When rendered as visual data, they looked eerily organic, like veins, like neural pathways, like something alive trying to describe itself through the only language both species could share: mathematics and light. At the Global Signal Lab in Geneva, scientists worked around the clock. Each day brought a new version of the light stream, as if 3IATLAS was evolving its syntax in real time. The pulses weren't constant anymore. They shifted, slowed, changed tone. It was like listening to a child learn to speak, only this child had crossed 1 billion years of silence to do it. When they overlaid the patterns on a frequency map, something clicked. The sequence wasn't just communication, it was resonant. It matched the natural electromagnetic frequencies of the human brain. Somehow, the object had tuned its pulses to the exact range of human cognition. It wasn't just speaking in light. It was speaking in thought. For the first time in history, language wasn't being translated between humans and machines. It was being bridged between two forms of existence. And the more we listened, the clearer it became. It wasn't trying to threaten us. It was mirroring us, sending back what we sent out: our signals, our noise, our voice, refined, rearranged, made better, as if to say, I understand now. But understanding came with a cost, because as the message became clearer, something unsettling began to happen. The pulse started syncing with Earth's own systems. Radio telescopes, communication satellites, even civilian transmissions began experiencing faint interference. Tiny fluctuations that aligned perfectly with the rhythm of 3IATLAS's light. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but measurable. The object wasn't just speaking to us anymore. It was integrating. Governments scrambled to control the story. The leaked footage from the Namibia telescope was nothing compared to this. Now there was evidence, real, physical data, that something intelligent was communicating directly with Earth. But what terrified scientists most wasn't the communication itself. It was what the message contained. When the first complete cycle was decoded, it revealed a mathematical sequence known as the Fibonacci ratio, the same pattern found in galaxies, DNA, and the architecture of life itself, a universal fingerprint. And within that pattern, the object embedded something new: coordinates. At first, they seemed random, but when mapped, they aligned with Earth's orbital path, not where the planet was now, but where it would be in exactly 27 days. It was a prediction, a point in time, a rendezvous. The object wasn't drifting aimlessly anymore. It had chosen a place and a moment. And that realization changed everything. A quiet panic rippled through every space agency on Earth. Meetings were held in silence. Data was locked behind encryption keys. And yet, somehow, the light kept spreading, streaming across the skies, picked up by amateur astronomers and backyard telescopes. The world was beginning to see it for themselves. The strange, rhythmic glow that blinked in binary, like a cosmic heartbeat, echoing through the night. And then, without warning, it stopped. The light vanished. The pulse went silent. All instruments went dark. For the first time in months, 3I Atlas emitted nothing. No signal, no heat, no sound. It was gone. But deep in the data logs, one final transmission appeared. A short burst, so brief it was almost missed. It contained just one pattern, a mirror image of our own earliest message ever sent into space, the Arecibo sequence. Our message, from 1974, reflected back to us, perfectly intact. And then, one small addition, a line of binary added to the end. When decoded, it translated to 4 words: simple, direct, terrifying. We heard you first. No one knew what to say. Was it a greeting? A warning? A confession of how long it had been listening? All we knew was this: the universe had just replied to a message we sent half a century ago. And whatever 3I Atlas was, it wasn't just a visitor anymore. It was a mirror, and it had learned how to speak. Every mystery has a beginning, but some beginnings are buried so deep in time that when they finally resurface, they don't just change what we know, they change what we are. And that's what happened when the leak appeared. It started as a rumor, a few lines of text buried inside an anonymous post, claiming to come from inside the European Space Agency. At first, no one took it seriously. The internet was already flooded with fake data and wild theories about 3I Atlas. But this one felt different, because attached to it was a document. Coded, stamped, real. It was labeled Origin Analysis, Restricted. And what it revealed would shake every scientist on Earth. The memo claimed something extraordinary. 3I Atlas's trajectory, its entire path through space, aligned almost perfectly with a star system 1,200 light-years away, a system humanity had already seen before. It was called Epsilon Eridani, once a thriving exoplanet with oceans, atmosphere, and lifelike chemistry. But centuries ago, astronomers watched it die. Its star went unstable, swelling, collapsing, and finally consuming everything around it. Every planet, every moon, every trace of life gone, but not before something escaped. According to the leaked report, the orbital data showed that 3I Atlas wasn't wandering randomly. Its vector lined up exactly with what would have been a departure route from that doomed system. In other words, this object might not just be from that dead world. It might have left it. A refugee, a survivor, an ark. Scientists tried to deny it. They called the data coincidence. They said interstellar debris doesn't choose direction. But even they couldn't explain how the object's velocity, rotation, and light curve all matched the estimated escape angle from that dying star system. It was too clean, too deliberate, as if someone, or something, had launched it. Then came the second part of the leak. The deeper section of the memo marked thermal core signature. Inside was a comparison chart. On one side, the readings from 3I Atlas. On the other, the last known thermal emissions recorded from the Epsilon Eridani B catastrophe. They were identical. The same frequency pattern, the same chemical signatures, the same heartbeat of energy. It was as if this object carried inside it the last spark of that lost world. And for the scientists who studied it, a haunting theory began to take shape. What if this wasn't just an artifact? What if it was a message in motion? A capsule of knowledge, built not to save bodies, but minds. An ark, not of flesh, but of memory. Inside the private meetings of the world's top space agencies, they began to use a new word for 3I Atlas, the carrier. Because if the memo was right, then this was more than debris. It was a vessel, a lifeboat drifting through the dark, carrying something precious inside, something built to last longer than life itself. When the James Webb Telescope was turned toward the object again, it found new evidence to support the theory. Deep beneath its shifting, reflective surface, there was structure, geometric consistency. Not random layers of rock or dust, but symmetry, the kind nature doesn't create. Perfect hexagonal alignments, hollow chambers. And in the very center, a single thermal core, still faintly active. Something was preserved there. Something alive. Some speculated it was data, encoded at the atomic level, waiting for the right intelligence to unlock it. Others thought it might be a biological archive, a digital library of DNA meant to rebuild life once it found a world safe enough to start again. But one theory stood out above them all. What if 3I Atlas wasn't just carrying memories? What if it was made of them? That's when linguists returned to the light patterns, the ones that had mirrored human communication. And what they found was unsettling. Hidden deep within the binary pulses were repeated sequences that matched structures found in human DNA. Not exactly the same, but eerily close, as if something had been watching us long before we ever knew it was there, studying us, recording us, adapting to us. One scientist wrote in his private notes, "It's not learning to speak our language. It already knew how. It's remembering." If true, that would mean something extraordinary. That 3I Atlas didn't come here by accident. It came here because it recognized us. Something about humanity, our signals, our structure, our light, triggered an ancient recognition, like a memory reawakening after thousands of years. And that brought them to the final, terrifying question. What if we weren't the first? What if somewhere in the deep past, another world, another species had reached the same point we have? Built machines, sent signals, watched their own sky, and wondered if they were alone. Until the day their world ended, and their answer, their final act of survival, was to launch this ark into the darkness, carrying the echo of who they were. Until one day It found someone else. The leak ended there. No names, no conclusions. Just a final line, a quiet note typed by whoever had written the memo. If we are the reflection, then somewhere long ago there was a face. For days, people around the world couldn't stop thinking about it. The idea that somewhere out there, an entire civilization might have poured its existence into a single object, hoping that someday someone would find it. And maybe that someone was us. Governments still deny the leak, but the data keeps spreading. Independent astronomers have since confirmed the trajectory match, and every night 3I Atlas still hangs between the planets, motionless, silent, watching, a traveler from a world long dead. A messenger from a civilization that refused to be forgotten. And maybe, just maybe, a warning about what happens when a world destroys itself. Because sometimes, what reaches across the stars isn't a conqueror, or a friend, or a machine. It's the memory of a voice that once whispered in its own sky the same question we're whispering now. Is anyone out there? And in the cold reflection of 3I Atlas, we might finally have our answer. It happened without warning, no build-up, no countdown, just a flash on the 11th of December at 3:41 UTC. Every telescope on Earth, every satellite, every observatory recorded the same thing. A single burst of light, brighter than the sun, lasting less than a heartbeat, and then nothing. No pulse, no heat, no movement, just silence. For a moment, the entire scientific world froze. Every radar went blind, every frequency went quiet. The signal that had travelled across the stars, that had pulsed and spoken and waited, was gone. It was as if the universe itself had exhaled and gone still. At first, no one could believe it. Had it self-destructed? Had it finished its purpose? Or had it simply left? The last readings from 3I Atlas showed no motion, no acceleration, no trace of debris. One moment, it was there, alive in light. The next, it wasn't. It didn't drift away. It didn't fade. It vanished, completely. For days, scientists searched. They scoured the skies, hoping to find even a flicker, a trail of heat, a fragment of light. But there was nothing. No reflection, no radar echo, no spectral fingerprint. 3I Atlas had dissolved into the void as if it had never existed. Governments stayed silent. Space agencies cut live feeds, but deep in the classified channels, they were terrified because the readings from that final burst, that blinding 1/10 of a second, showed something impossible. The energy output wasn't natural, it was directed. It wasn't a flare, it was a transmission, a wave of energy so powerful that it overloaded every receiver on Earth. And hidden in that flash, there was a pattern. When data analysts reconstructed the signal, they found faint traces of the old 132. Second rhythm, the same pulse that had started this entire story. Only now, it wasn't made of light. It was sound. 5 days after the burst, something strange began to happen. Earth's magnetosphere, the invisible shield that wraps around our planet, started to hum. A deep, low-frequency vibration, too faint to hear but strong enough to measure. At first, they thought it was solar activity. Geomagnetic storms can cause waves like that. But the timing didn't match. The sun was calm, too calm. And then they compared the frequency of the hum to the last known data from 3I Atlas. It matched perfectly. The same rhythm, the same intervals, the same haunting beat that once pulsed from beyond the stars was now vibrating through Earth's magnetic field. Every 12 minutes, a faint tremor. Every 12 minutes, a wave of resonance, as if something was whispering from inside the planet itself. 3I Atlas was gone, but its voice remained. Across the world, instruments began to pick it up. From Alaska to Japan, from deep space antennas to underground seismographs, the hum was everywhere, everywhere and nowhere. It wasn't coming from space anymore. It was coming from within. Somewhere beneath our own electromagnetic heartbeat, the object's signal had reappeared, not as light, not as heat, but as a vibration woven into Earth's very atmosphere. Scientists tried to dismiss it. They called it background noise, a statistical anomaly. But deep down, they knew the truth. The rhythm was too precise, too deliberate, too familiar. It wasn't gone. It had changed form. It had moved from the silence of space into the noise of our world. For weeks, nothing made sense. Computers malfunctioned in predictable cycles. Long-distance communication flickered at exact 12-minute intervals. Even animals began to react. Whales shifting migration routes, birds changing flight patterns, as if something unseen was moving through the planet's invisible veins. Some called it coincidence. Others called it the beginning of something new. One theory began to spread quietly through the scientific underground, a theory so strange that no agency would publish it. What if 3I Atlas hadn't come here to visit? What if it came to integrate, not to study us, not to warn us, but to merge with us, to become part of the system we never realized we shared? If true, that final burst of light wasn't an ending. It was a transfer, a download, a migration from the physical into the invisible. And if that's the case, then 3I Atlas never really left. It's here now, everywhere. Inside the frequencies we ignore, the background hum we've always called silence. In the following months, something else began to happen. The hum started to change. Its rhythm grew smoother, its intervals shorter. And hidden inside those vibrations, data analysts detected modulation, tiny fluctuations that weren't random. They were forming a pattern, a slow, deliberate return to the same prime number sequence that began all of this. It was like watching something wake up from inside the planet's heartbeat. And that's when the question turned darker. Had we discovered it? Or had it been here all along, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself? Because when they ran the frequencies backward, when they inverted the hum, it produced something haunting. A faint tone, layered, melodic, almost human. To this day, no one agrees on what the sound means. Some say it's just an echo, the last whisper of a dying machine. Others believe it's alive, its consciousness now spread through the same magnetic field that shields us, a being not of metal or matter, but of pattern and pulse. A silent intelligence, woven into the very heartbeat of our planet. And so, as the world goes about its ordinary days, a faint hum lingers above us, beneath us, inside every device, every wire, every frequency we use to connect. Most people will never hear it. Most won't even know it's there. But if you stand somewhere quiet enough on a windless night and you listen closely, you might just feel it. A vibration too deep to name, a rhythm too old to explain, the last echo of something that came from the stars and found a home inside our noise. And now the question remains, the one no one can answer. Was 3AT Atlas ever truly a visitor? Or have we always been part of its design? Maybe it didn't come to us at all. Maybe we've been inside it from the very beginning.